I'm really delighted to have this chance to speak with Julia Geer. And Julia, thank you so much for joining me here on the podcast. And how are you doing today?
Thanks for inviting me, Todd. I'm also really excited to be here. I am doing great today. It's Thursday. I have family coming this weekend, and I'm really looking forward to some good quality time over the holidays.
Amazing. We niched out what we're going to talk about. And during this conversation, we're going to aim to talk about the distinctions between yoga therapeutics, and yoga therapy. And then also another one of your specialties that we're going to aim to philosophize about is the intersection between AI and natural intelligence and how yoga and Ayurveda can help us in this time of massive transformation. Now, on that note, I also want to bring up the fact that I was fortuitous enough to meet you because your parents were visiting here in Florida. Or no, your parents live here in Florida, and you were visiting your parents from the West Coast of America. And I got a chance to meet you in person and find out this incredible history that you have in the world of yoga, in which case you were kind enough to say, I'd love to be on your podcast. And so with that being said, thank you so much for joining me. Can you tell us a little bit, me and us a little bit about your background in the world of yoga?
Yeah, of course. So I took my first yoga class in 1997 now. I was actually rehabbing a shoulder surgery when I was in college as an athlete. And I took a yoga class and I totally got hooked. I found that not only was my body, my actual physical body, stronger and had more resilience than ever before, even though I was training 20 hours a week, in the traditional exercise. But I also noticed that my relationships were healthier, my grades were better. I found it easy to just kind of go about. So I got really curious very early on about what else was happening other than these practices of postures and a little bit of breathing and a little bit of sitting. Um, and so I kept it as a tool, so immediately I knew it was helping with stress management and just life management in general. And I kept it as a tool for many, many years. And then in 2015, I got serious. 2014, 2015, I got serious about the teacher role and deepening my own practice and knowledge and becoming a certified teacher. And that led me all the way through to becoming a certified yoga therapist through the IAYT and a Ayurvedic health counselor as well. I never knew what Ayurveda was until about 15 years ago, and it just blew my mind. And then additionally, I have also been trained by Jack Kornfield and Tara Brach in their mindfulness meditation teacher certification program. And so it's this really cool trifecta, I would say, of these amazing ancient wisdom traditions, ancient wisdom practices that I have always been thinking about applying to more people, making them more accessible in our modern world.
Nice. Can you tell me a little bit about then what you see some of the distinction between yoga therapeutics, and yoga therapy?
Absolutely. And this is a really lively conversation right now in the world of yoga, and especially yoga therapeutics and yoga therapy as integrative health practices and holistic health is becoming more of a conversation here in the West. And a lot of my training stems from the Kripalu Center in West Stockbridge in Western Massachusetts, which has a long history of one putting wonderful things in the world and excellence. And even at even at Kripalu, there's the School of Yoga, the School of Yoga Therapy, and the School of Yoga Therapy, in which you can also become a therapeutic yoga teacher. And with this long history of yoga tradition at Kripalu and this new kind of newer label of yoga therapy, there's a lot of discussion. And I really see two very distinct paths. And yes, all yoga can be therapeutic. Absolutely. Depending on what your intention is and what you're coming for, I believe that yoga as as a tradition in itself of anyone showing up to your studio or anywhere on a path towards wellness, just general wellness and potentially even enlightenment. Um, and then yoga therapeutics and yoga therapy are then applied to therapeutics to groups, therapy to the individual for specific conditions that have specific wellness goals and objectives. Typically, people have a Western diagnosis. And so there's many things that come along with that. And so the path of yoga therapy specifically is tailored toward that individual with a very comprehensive set of training and knowledge from the practitioner to be able to really holistically see and hold that person and support them on their path. And then the therapeutics fit really well in group settings. And, for people that are experiencing similar symptoms or challenges or something that's going on in their life. But there are three really distinct paths, and the path of yoga therapy specifically is truly now part of many multidisciplinary care teams in integrative wellness centers as an equal and important part of that care team.
Amazing. Do you see these three, if we were to say there are three separate communities, are we all interacting kindly with each other, or are we having debates that, I mean, is there any reason why this doesn't all fit well together?
I believe that there's some gaps in understanding and some gaps in knowledge, especially what is the difference? What is the actual difference for people that have not gone through a full yoga therapy training? And it's similar in when speaking with healthcare providers in the West. What it, like if a patient comes in for anxiety, say, the practitioner might have heard, oh, yoga is great for anxiety. And sending a person that's very anxious to a very hot yoga class could actually jack up the nervous system even more, right? Whereas if they were sent to yoga therapy, a yoga therapist would know exactly how to and what to do to care for that person that's experiencing symptoms of anxiety.
That makes sense.
I think that's a good example. And so having conversations like this where, we can continue to open this conversation, I believe is very, very important because there's room for everybody, and there's room for all of us, and there's room for all of us to work together. And it doesn't need to be one without the other. It can be both at the same time.
Yeah. Good point. Like maybe you go to just the hot yoga studio, but then there's another studio that's just a yoga therapy center. Do we see many hot yoga studios that also offer yoga therapy, or do you still see that it's very separated?
It's specifically when we're talking about hot yoga, I think
Yeah, yeah.
there's
Like we're
not a
trying to be
ton of
diplomatic.
that
We're
of
trying to be
therapy.
diplomatic. Yeah. Because
um,
isn't there a little bit in the hot yoga world where it's kind of like just do the hot yoga class and it'll fix everything. And you're saying that like maybe with yoga therapy there's a little more, I mean, I guess maybe there's a distinction between if I do a 200-hour yoga teacher training and then I'm like, cool, I'm a yoga teacher and I got everything I need to know, I'm gonna go. Boom. But as a yoga therapist, you've done a lot more training. Isn't it somewhere between 500 to 1,000 hours?
it's yeah, so it's 800 hours to 1,000 hours, and in some cases there are two university programs where it's a full 2 year master's degree.
Wow.
So
It's
yeah,
cool.
so
Yeah.
that's not mainstreamed yet, but that gives people a really good idea of you truly went to get a master's in this as you would in other, in other subjects and other industries.
Yeah.
Whereas the 200 hour is sort of like the associate's degree, like the
Yes. Yeah.
associate's degree. It gets you started, it gets you with a foundational knowledge, but there is so much more to learn.
When you completed your 200-hour training, did you launch into teaching at that point, or did you just decide at that point, I would like to continue my education because I feel like I need to know more to be effective enough as a teacher? How did that play out for you?
I did do some training, or I did do some teaching, um, general public type of teaching, and I knew my path was in the therapeutic and yoga therapy aspect of things. And even when I knew that, I didn't really know the full scope of what I was headed towards, just that something was really guiding me in that direction, and it was very strong and I couldn't ignore not listening to it. And it was and continues to be an amazing body of work, body of knowledge, and ability to offer services like this into the world.
Nice. You said you love Ayurveda, and that was a game changer when you started to become aware of it and learn about it. Can you give me
Mhm.
an example of a way that Ayurveda has improved your own life?
Uh, Even the foundations of dinacharya and runacharya, so the daily routines and the seasonal routines, and being able to use those to adjust your energy. Like, even if you just think about brahmacharya and energy management, using those anchors of what you can do on a daily basis and what you can do on a seasonal basis, so that you can continue to show up consistently with a grounded presence and an open heart in this very complicated world, has been absolutely transformational for me.
Nice. That's cool.
Yeah.
Can you give me an example of a application of yoga therapy that you've been able to apply to a student and or client?
Absolutely. One of my favorites is that I have a client with COPD, who is in their 80s and has had really been struggling. And about a year ago, heard about yoga therapy and started doing weekly, just 30-minute sessions. So not even a really long time, but 30-minute sessions. And at the time was really struggling to walk and do any real activities of daily living outside the basics of eating, etc. And at the time had to accept that golf was probably no longer in the picture, which was a lifelong passion that sparked a lot of joy. And we started doing these 30-minute weekly yoga therapy sessions. And not only did things improve, he went to a regular 3-month checkup, and his tests were the best they had ever been in 5 years. And the only thing that he could point to that had changed was that he had started yoga therapy. And his healthcare provider was absolutely amazed. But nothing else had changed
Wow.
except starting yoga therapy. And in those sessions, it's really focused on breathing, some 6 rotations of the spine, joint mobility, some really simple practices that have had very, very powerful results. And this summer, this client started swimming in the pool. And we even talked about, the linking breath to movement as a very important part for the nervous system. And so doing the elementary backstroke, inhaling up and out, and then exhaling down, inhaling up and out, exhaling down. And that has sparked also so much joy. And so it's one of my favorite stories because these very simple practices can be so powerful and so meaningful in somebody's day to day.
Yeah, great point. That's cool.
Yeah. And when you have a client that has a condition like COPD with other health related complications, The training involved to really be able to appropriately know what the contraindications are, how to keep that client safe, uh, what kinds of practices are going to be effective for that client, are, a whole treasure chest of information and training to be confident both as a practitioner and also to allow that client to have trust in ability in what it is that you're offering.
What kind of shift have you noticed in the relationship that you have with people in the medical field now that you are a certified yoga therapist? Have you noticed a increase of respect for the work that you do? Have you noticed well, I doubt there'd be a decrease, but what type of rapport and or feedback are you receiving in your connection to working with people and attempting to be in line with the current medical field?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, being able to partner with healthcare providers and educating them about the amount of training and the vigorousness of the training that goes into becoming a yoga therapist. And the Western language really understands also things like, bachelor degrees and master's degrees, that type of thing. And so being able to use that language and then also pointing to the research. The research of yoga therapy continues to be more and more robust. And that is also really helpful when speaking to Western healthcare providers in helping them understand, especially when these practices are applied to specific conditions, specific health conditions. And then the certification from an accrediting body is also, and now there's a board test. I became a yoga therapist before the board exam became something, but now there's a board exam as well. And just having that dialogue and that conversation with healthcare providers really piques the interest and really gives them the confidence that the training and the care to make sure that this is a good complement to what it is that they're providing in their own scope of practice and how that can benefit the patients that they have.
Nice. Have you been able to set up any sort of referral relationship with any medical professionals, in which case they're actually referring their clients to you?
Yes. Yes. And a combination of mental health care providers and also yoga and specifically yoga therapy has been shown as also a wonderful non-pharmacological approach to chronic pain management. And that is also an extremely needed and robust opportunity for anyone. And sometimes the chronic pain clinic is with mental health care providers, and sometimes they're specific pain clinics, depending on the healthcare delivery system. And then there's also, some other areas of great interest and great opportunities specifically for yoga therapy that I've seen either people that are mentored or other students that have gone through a program is yoga therapy applied to oncology patients, yoga therapy applied to neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and their caregivers as well, and then cardiovascular diseases.
Amazing. Have you made any inroads with the yoga community that's a little bit more of like, say, the like kind of fitness yoga that we see, like, say, Vinyasa Flow and hot yoga and classes that are, I mean, I don't want to create any judgment on one or
Oh.
the other there because it's all an amazing field, right? But I'm just curious, have you made any inroads with some of those studios where they're also saying, like, maybe they have a client who comes in that says, I have this really terrible shoulder issue, and perhaps the teacher is realizing, all these chaturanga and dandasanas, all these low push-up position for this person might not be good. Let me refer you to this yoga therapist who might be able to give you some different exercises that I'm not fully trained in. Has that happened at all?
It has. It's not my specific area of focus, but there are many, many yoga therapists that exactly that. And typically it starts out with a yoga therapy, or sorry, a yoga student that has come up with an injury, whether it's hip, knee, shoulder. Those are the big ones. Those are the big ones in the yoga world: hip, knees, shoulders.
Yeah.
Sometimes some wrists, and also or they're they're aging a little bit, and their practice, they're noticing that their practice is not what it was 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And how do you keep yourself safe and in a yoga class, and what does that look like in the body that you're in now? And those are typically the doors that open. Another door that opens is many yoga studio owners that are burned out, or overwhelmed. They will open themselves up to exploring yoga therapy. What is the yoga therapy, and how can I benefit from that for my own wellness? And it's not happening, in the classes. And and that those are doors that are opening. There is a big question about, well, what's the difference between a very well trained private yoga instructor and a yoga therapist? And one of them is the process of intake, because both of them are personalized practices, right? But the yoga therapy is, there's a process of intake, and there's very specific wellness and goals and objectives that are set, not only for the first session, but over several sessions. And so you really are working towards something that is specific to health. And it doesn't necessarily need to be physical either. We have the five koshas, and maybe something's going on in the Manomaya kosha, or maybe something's going on in the Pranamaya kosha. It doesn't necessarily need to be the Annamaya kosha to come to yoga therapy.
On that note, just in case somebody listening has never heard the koshas, can you name the five koshas in Sanskrit and then give the English equivalent?
Absolutely. So the Annamaya kosha so there's five layers of being as defined by the yoga philosophy. The Annamaya kosha is the physical body. The Pranamaya kosha is the breath and energy body. The Manomaya kosha is the emotional body. Vyanamaya kosha is the thoughts and beliefs. So in like the mindfulness world, it's more of like, what's the chitta-vrittis, or what are the beliefs, what's the default mode network doing? And then Anandamaya kosha, which is your interconnectedness with others, both other beings and other things in the world.
Great. I like
Yeah.
your short, concise, and to the point definition. Wonderful.
Thank
Can
you.
you can you give me an idea of like how on that intake process? And so if
Mhm.
you're keeping these five koshas in mind, for
Mhm.
example, with the Annamaya, the food body, maybe we would like take a couple questions about like what their diet consists of currently. And then in terms of say like then covering that spectrum, is there a protocol for trying to identify aspects of each of those five elements or koshas?
There's a framework.
Mm.
And there's specifically because it's personalized to individual. 95% of the time, unless you're in a class, uh, there's a framework, but not a specific protocol, if that makes sense. And this has been a wonderful way to work within a framework. And yes, there's a series of questions during the intake, both assessment and also a conversation. And the assessment is actually looking at the body, doing a breath assessment, all the little subtle things that you see, and you learn how to read people's affect, the prosody and tone of their voice. Are they making eye contact with you or not? All of these things are signals of what kosha might be out of balance and which kosha might be the doorway to bring everything back into balance.
Mm. That's cool. You know, in the 200-hour yoga world, there's this ethics component, at least in relation to the Yoga Alliance, that encourages students and or the teacher trainers to impart this concept that if we are working outside of our scope of practice, that we should refer our student and or the person that practices with us to a professional. For example, somebody comes in, says, I feel suicidal. As a yoga teacher, that's not my scope of practice. Therefore, I could potentially refer them to a psychotherapist or someone of that professional credential. As a yoga therapist, though, it seems like you're somewhere in the middle. How do you know when to refer, and how do you know when to take that on yourself with your practice tools?
That's a great question. And I'm so glad you asked it because scope of practice is also a really important part of the yoga therapist. And notice I'm using the word client, not patient, because technically they are not in our Western system anyway. They're technically we are technically not a licensed healthcare provider. So they are still clients. The perfect example of someone that is suicidal, that would be a refer out. Or if you are working in a healthcare setting, when you are on a multidisciplinary care team, where the person, this client of yours is a patient, they have a psychotherapist, maybe sometimes they have an eating disorder specialist, maybe they have a psychiatrist that's doing med management, maybe they also have a, a surgeon, an oncologist. There's many different ways that care team comes together, and it's very clear that this is what the scope is during yoga therapy, and this is what the scope is with your licensed healthcare providers. And like, so for a client that's suicidal, for example, it's out of scope for me to say you don't need any other healthcare providers. We'll just manage things through yoga therapy. No, the ethics is, and for me personally, unless you are seeing a licensed healthcare provider for your mental health condition, it's not safe for me to also work with you one on one.
Mm.
Yeah, and many times as well, we converse with we converse with the healthcare providers. We get permission from the client, obviously, but the healthcare providers often welcome additional modalities and additional care to help support whoever the client or patient is,
Nice.
and that happens very often. And even though yoga therapy isn't required to do HIPAA, patient privacy, many infrastructures and systems that we have set up do follow HIPAA, and that also gives confidence to the healthcare providers that that we are on the same path in that way.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and that's not a system that a local yoga studio necessarily has the ability to hold.
Yeah, correct. If say for example, I want to become a yoga therapist, is there a specific school and or direction you would endorse for me to go? I'm sure there's a couple of different of really high-end wonderful programs, but if I'm a busy yoga teacher, I want to learn more, is there an online program that you have either encountered yourself and or have heard is amazing that you would recommend that I check out?
Yeah. So the first resource is on the IAYT website, International Association of Yoga Therapy, IAYT. They have a list of schools, a list of accredited schools, and all of those accredited schools have ensure competencies and making sure that the curriculum that is for students is appropriate and comprehensive enough, and the training is great. Um, Many of the schools are either offering a hybrid option now, where some of the learning is online and some of it is in person, and or some of the modules are online, some of the modules are in person, that type of structure. The um, the two master's programs that I mentioned, I guess I should go back and first say I'm biased. I think the Kripalu School of Integrative Yoga Therapy is amazing. I chose it. I chose it for myself. I chose it for all the reasons of Kripalu is an amazing place. They have a standard of excellence that has been, decades now in the making. They have a wonderful school. Joseph and Lillian LePage were the originators of the curriculum and the program. And even though they're not still formally part of it, it is the spirit and the comprehensiveness and their heart is still absolutely part of it. And it's a wonderful, wonderful school and wonderful curriculum.
Very cool.
Uh, and Kripalu has both some modules online and some modules in person. Maryland University for Integrative Health is one of the master's degrees, as is Loyola Marymount, which is on the West Coast. So you've got an East Coast and a West Coast school. Phoenix Rising, which is based out of San Diego, is also a really wonderful yoga therapy program. And then after that, look at the list, because there are new schools coming up. There are new schools coming up and being accredited, and this is a formalized, a newer field, and there are more and more wonderful things happening every day.
Nice.
Yeah. And before that, so Kripalu, the first 300 hours of the 800 hour is a 500-hour training. And after that, you become an advanced teacher of therapeutic yoga. And so that's also a really great way to, even if you take the first foundations module, it's a great way to get a little bit more information and some overview about what this yoga therapy and yoga therapeutic field is, and the direction that it's going in.
Nice. I appreciate all that information, Julia. I'm super curious myself. I've met a lot of great yoga therapists over the years, and so the more I keep hearing about it, the more I'm intrigued and wanting to pursue it myself. Uh,
Yeah, one of the great things is because I've been thinking about this a lot lately, because even myself, I've taken so many amazing like special interest training, right? Like Judith Lasseter's restorative yoga. And I mean, that's one that just came to mind, but so many special interest trainings, which is great. And many yoga teachers or yoga studio owners like yourself have done that type of thing. But the yoga therapy curriculums make sure that the comprehensiveness of the information that you get, like there's no holes. And that's really difficult to do on your own with special interest training.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Julia, your website is thegeershift.com. Your
That's
last
right.
name spelled Geer.
You're right.
Uh, so, with pun intended, can we make a gear shift? I'm super curious about what your background is prior to yoga in the world of technology.
Absolutely. So perfect segue.
Thank you.
Perfect segue.
All right. Okay.
So I did my undergrad in management and technology, and I had no idea what that was going to mean, but what it, when or what kind of path that would put me on. But I've always sort of had this, this wisdom tradition world and this tech world all the way through my adult life, at least. And so in my tech world, the first 18 years were all in healthcare. And it happened that, almost all of those included technologies that were, early artificial intelligence all the way through some of the first modern day FDA approved artificial intelligence technologies. And and my roles were always commercial. So even though I was a in those in those arenas, I was the non-tech, I was the non-technical, I was the technical commercial person. And the funny part was I was the non-technical person on the team,
Understood.
always working with computer scientists, engineers, data scientists, et cetera. But I was really making sure that these technologies got adopted and that the layperson could understand what it is that they did, what they meant, and what the benefits were.
Wow. So on that note, you're fluent in watching the evolution of artificial intelligence. From our previous conversation prior to the podcast, you had made mention that you were seeing how AI was going to come into where it is now before most people were wanting to acknowledge that that was true. Can you talk a little bit about what type of I don't want to say warnings, maybe the better word is what type of advice you were giving some of these folks that were like maybe in the healthcare world that were like, AI, come on, we're not going to be having computers and robots do what I do. I'm a human. Can you tell me like what that seemed like from your perspective?
Absolutely. And such a good question. And the fears in healthcare were and are very similar to some of the fears that we're now seeing as artificial intelligence, generative artificial intelligence even is available at scale for the everyday consumer now. So, we're all humans using we're all humans using all of these technologies. The healthcare applications were very specific, obviously, but the first thing was especially that when there were technologies that had static algorithms, where there was one algorithm, it did a specific job, it did things like assist in sensitivity and specificity for diagnosing cancer, for example. It automated some repetitive tasks, those types of, that allowed healthcare providers to be a little bit more efficient, those types of things. Those were all sort of the early artificial intelligence, and those are pretty straightforward, right? Like it's an automator that doesn't change. And then when our artificial intelligence got mature enough that it could start to continuously learn, and that's when a lot of questions really started to come up. First of all, there was infrastructure in place and economies of scale that made it cost effective to be able to use some of this technology, first in the healthcare setting and now for everyone. And it was then of how do I trust how do I trust what it's doing when it's continuously learning? I want to know what kind of data it's been trained on, and I want to really understand how it's going to influence my decision making as a clinician. And even so, it's still an assistant. It still has not and will not will not for a long time actually take over. But if you think about some artificial intelligence, like robotics and those types of technologies, like those have been coming up for decades now in the healthcare world. And I will say that, one of the early AI conferences in healthcare, this was when the machine learning, deep learning technologies were first coming out. So we're going back to 2016, 2015, 2016. One of the leaders of one of the famous hospitals, he said, look, don't be concerned about, by the time you need to be concerned about AI taking over your job as a very highly trained, highly skilled healthcare professional, you need to be worried about what AI is doing in your life. But what is going to happen is that if you don't adopt this technology, the healthcare provider that does is going to be that much more efficient than you are. And you will then become irrelevant as a healthcare provider.
Mm,
And I know even that is controversial to say, especially in a world where doctor visits are very short now, and like there's not like, where does the humanity still come into play in some of these things? And at the same time, there's a huge access problem, or challenge with not enough healthcare providers for the number of patients that we have. And some of these technologies can really support making the system more efficient so that more people can get care. And that's really important. The other thing that it can really do is, because it can process complex, many disparate sources of data that are complex and impact decision making, it can be uh, it can be better than a human at being able to do that. And that is just a fact. In some of the professions in medicine is like up to a 30% error rate. And that's human, right? Even as a wonderful, 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 highly skilled, highly trained, very clear, brilliant clinician, sometimes you forget about a data point, or sometimes a pattern that you're looking at, you miss something. And that's a fact. And the computers will not miss that with this generative technology.
mm.
And that's going to impact safety for patients, which is really exciting.
That's so fascinating. I'm curious. So, like, I remember the first time I was speaking with somebody that was interacting with a hospital locally, where he started talking about the way AI was being implemented. And this is about, I guess you're probably right, like 2016-ish. And my first thought was like what you said, oh no, the humanity, what's going to happen?
Yep.
And then, but like you said, the ability to compile information and come out with a conclusion and or a statement based off so many different variables that it actually was more efficient than human. So the first time I heard that, I was like, no way. Like I couldn't even believe it. But now it's pretty obvious that that's quite true. Um, as a yoga practitioner, I feel like I used to fantasize about the days of old of like a yogi or a yogini or a person who practiced yoga sitting in a cave and just contemplating the life's mysteries and just living this really simple life. And now a modern day yoga, we are both, you and I, and I'm sure a lot of you listening are modern day practitioners and yogis. Do we obviously need to want to, or I'm thinking you're thinking we probably want to implement AI as a yoga teacher and a yoga professional, but are we losing yoga in the process, or how can AI help us gain better yoga? I don't even know if that makes sense. Did that make
That does make sense. And I love that you threw this question out. And it's something that I've been thinking about for a long, and almost for a really long time, because I've had these two parallel paths for so long. And the society that we live in today has technology. We are in relationship with technology in some way. And we have control of what that relationship looks like. I mean, we really do. We have control over the knowledge of how these systems and these technologies are working. We have control over, as adults at least, of how we're going to interact with that technology. And defining that relationship is really important. The other thing that's really important, where yoga and Ayurveda and mindfulness can really help us, is make sure that the stimulus is balanced between artificial intelligence and natural intelligence. And what's like, if you think about how could artificial intelligence create space in my day so that I can sit and meditate, so that I have an extra 15, 20 minutes to meditate, or so that I have an extra 30 minutes or an hour to go for a walk in nature so that I can fill myself up with the natural stimulus that helps my body stay in homeostasis. Those are types of things that are really exciting. The other ways that I really feel that yoga and Ayurveda can really support is that I see that critical thinking, creativity, and discernment are going to continue to be very, very, very important skills as humans as we are interacting with all of these technologies. Um, Critical thinking in the way that you interact and prompt and um, be in relationship. Having those critical thinking skills are really important. In order to be good at critical thinking, you need to have a clear head, you need to have a sound mind and body. um, the creativity, we have so much amazing research now about how these practices can open up our synapses for creativity. And the way you do that is not actually at the computer, but either in nature, inspiring awe, doing practices like creative vinyasa flows, etc., that really kind of get those juices going. And then you sit down and you have better ideas to work with artificial intelligence on. And then the last is discernment. And for your Samkhya philosophy lovers that are a part of your listeners, like the concept of buddhi and that discernment and that really important connection to self, to take what the artificial intelligence suggests or is telling you and have the discernment to say yes, no, that or that doesn't it for me, or the way that was written is not aligned with how I feel, and be able to trust that and be clear about that and be connected to your intuition and your natural intelligence. Those are going to be very, very, very important skills as artificial intelligence technologies continue to be more and more a part of our lives.
Mm. Oh, that brings up so many thoughts and ideas. I mean, it sounds like everything you laid out just now is along the lines of artificial intelligence is an amazingly powerful tool that also could cause a lot of confusion and maybe overrun our life in some way, shape, or form. And that yoga would serve as some way to stay clear amongst this very challenging to know what's real and what's not. I guess it opens up a lot of questions along the line of like, I guess, so I see that as like yoga then would serve as a balancing tool to be able to handle the artificial side of things. Do you see any place or time where artificial intelligence will intersect with the yoga beyond content creation? Because like right now, so like on YouTube, if I go when I go to publish this video for the podcast, YouTube has added a new button that says, "Did you use artificial intelligence in the creation of the content via like, is the imagery that the person watching, is it fake? Is it like made?
Right.
Is it like, I mean, and it's getting so good. I have a hard time really even picking apart what's actually a real image that someone took with a photo versus like something that I talked into and said, create a mountain with a girl standing in front of it with a flower in her hair. Like it's so hard sometimes to see that. So I get it why the social media companies are saying here, let people know that some sort
Yeah.
of artificial has been used and this is not all just natural. But then at the same time, I'm like, where do we draw that line? Because I mean, is I'm using Zoom, which kind of is
Mhm.
integrated with artificial intelligence. I'm using platforms that help me to compile the information from my blog post, which is a form of an artificial intelligence. I mean, I am using a lot of artificial intelligence just in the creation of this episode. So it's like I'm often wondering, well, when do I check that box and when do I don't? Like, because it's getting so intermeshed in all of the work that I do. So I'm just wondering Oh, I guess out of everything I just said, what popped into your head?
Two things popped into my head. The first is, again, what are your intentions? What are your own morals and ethics and values, and being very clear about those in order to make these decisions. And admittedly, on this topic, the laws have not caught up with the technology right now. And
Mm.
that's a fact. The laws
Are we
have
gonna
not caught up
are we gonna
yet.
see a change in that ratio? Do you think the laws could catch up, or is our AI so much more powerful and faster than the law than humans that we could even create the laws to catch up?
I know that there's a lot of attention and a lot of discussion about this, and there are some really wonderful conversations going on. How fast it will happen, we don't know. And in that, in that gap, but between when there are things in place for and now, that's also why it's really important for you as a human to be, to be situated in yourself, to be grounded in, what's okay with you, and what privacy settings are you putting on your usage, and your honesty about, yes, this was created by AI. And so the question about so then the question about AI is a spectrum of like, when do I do it? When do I not? First of all, you listen to your intuition about when it's right and when it's not. Another guideline is, did AI create this without any um, interaction with me
Mm,
at all?
mm. Yeah, like
And
this
if it did,
conversation.
the
Yeah.
answer is absolutely yes.
Yes.
All of the things that you said, though, like, yes, even in this podcast, AI is creating things in the background. It's maybe like your personal assistant and giving you some key ideas of, this might help or that might help. But at the end of the day, you're still the editor. You're the person that has the final say.
Yeah.
And when that's the case, then you are still an active participant in the process of whatever it is that you're creating.
Yeah. This question might sound out there, but maybe in your world it's not that out there. So in the recent release of Elon Musk's robots, do you
Yeah.
see a future where what you or I would walk into a class and the robot is either in the class with us? I don't see the reason why the robot would be taking yoga. I mean, the crazy thing is I saw videos of Elon's robots actually practicing yoga,
Yeah.
doing yoga poses, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. Because like I've as a massage therapist and yoga teacher, I thought, well, one, that's the cool thing about AI, it'll never take away my job. Like I just can't imagine a robot's going to be able to use its claws or its fingers or whatever it has for its palpatory skill is going to replace a human's palpatory skill. But then the more we go down this track, I'm starting to go, oh, maybe I was wrong. Like maybe one day I'll be walking, or I might actually have a robot. This is totally crazy. I would never do this, but I'll have a robot standing in front of the room and saying, welcome, Julia, to the class today, with my voice sounding just like me and going,
Mhm.
okay, let's begin. Let's begin with a Surya Namaskara A. Raise your arms above your head and exhale. I mean, is that totally sci-fi, or do you think it's going to get integrated into our lives where it's going to become that interesting?
Where I believe the robots will be really helpful is places where there are shortages, either shortages of humans to be able to carry out tasks, and or places where it's really unsafe for humans to be. In specific to a yoga class, as a human, would you want to go to a yoga class taught by a
No.
robot? So,
No,
like,
I'm
I
too
don't
sci-fi.
foresee the
It's too, yeah,
uptake of
no, yeah.
robot-led yoga classes being, because he at the because if you think about a robot as like a virtual stand-in, right? Like a replacement for a human. Part of what you love about, even I would say, even probably the teachers on your roster, people go to different, people love different teachers for that
Yeah,
unspeakable
yeah,
thing,
yeah, yeah,
that is not going to go away. Like, we're
yeah,
still biological, humans that are looking for stimulus from other biological humans. I'm terrified about virtual companions. I'm terrified about this. There are robots being made to be virtual companions. And I mean, but this has been in development for at least a decade, if not two. And that's terrifying. And it may help with some with some of the epidemic of loneliness in situations where people are isolated and they don't have any other options. And so it's really a balance of
Yeah,
what is the purpose, and what is the gap. But I'm pro human, even though I love technology and I think it can really enable us in amazing ways. I am also absolutely pro human and hope that also the yoga teacher doesn't get replaced by a robot.
agreed. I'm super optimistic as well that we will, like what you're stating or postulating, that we'll maintain control over it and it'll just help us. I do think, like in terms of, say, like memory care in adult and in aging and in um, assisted living facilities, that if there aren't enough people to help, that there will be like some great things could come out of this in relation to like you said, medical care. It's going to be amazing to watch. So then, are you, as a yoga teacher and as a yoga therapist, what AI tools are you using? Like, if someone
So
comes to you and say, I have COPD, are you going? I'm now, obviously you're doing research. Now, one thing, I'm sorry, I'm going to change subject a little bit, stay on subject, but I'm curious what
okay.
your thoughts are. I remember somebody said to me that, like, if you and I had a blog and we've been blogging all these years, and we hope that through our blogging, through our search engine optimization, that our blog would appear at the top of the Google search. And now I remember someone, like, not even that long ago, like maybe 6 or 8 months ago, goes, guess what? They're going to start doing this AI thing where when you ask a question in Google, your blog won't actually compete so much for the top. There's still SEO below, but now the AI is answering the question for me. So all that work that people have put into trying to attract traffic through their hard work of writing on sites will become obsolete. What is your thought on that?
That shift is definitely occurring.
It's already
That shift is
happened, right?
definitely
Isn't it
occurring.
amazing? I know it
Yeah,
happens
and
so
the
fast.
the
Yeah.
concept of search engine is definitely evolving with AI. And for instance, um, Google is a perfect example of, they have their own learning language model and they have a search engine. And OpenAI just announced a search engine as well. And these things are going to come together. And if you've noticed, because I'm still absolutely Google searching and then asking the language model things. And it is the difference in the answers that you get is
Mm,
really unbelievable. That being said, there's still, there's bricks and mortar businesses. There's things that you want to look at on maps. Those types of things. The presentation of the information is going to definitely shift. As a yoga therapist, for instance, Google specifically has always been really good at search and always been really good at scientific information. And so to look up a disease state, for example, like COPD, Google is my go-to for that. And the Google AI specifically, Gemini is my go-to for that. I use other language models for other different things. I have many technologies like Zoom, that like Calendly, that automate repetitive tasks. I also have one for like things like business expenses and accounting and stuff like that, that aren't only automating tasks now, but also generating insights into like financial management planning and that kind of thing. Um, I I love using ChatGPT in the kitchen. It's like my secret weapon as a chef now. To
for recipes and or
recipes,
for, yeah,
ideas.
yeah,
I've got these
yeah.
5 ingredients. Give me
Oh,
four or
cool.
five ideas,
Yeah.
or like, and this is an example I've used before for, if you're trying to do a vata pacifying diet, for example, and I have these 3 choices of foods, what would be supportive? And if you've set up a custom GPT, that is an Ayurveda expert, for example, you can ask it and it will help you, in those times, which is really cool.
Yeah. Are
Yeah.
you seeing, I mean, I would imagine the creativity from a yoga teacher in relation to creating vinyasa flow sequences are still coming from natural intelligence. Have you heard anybody going in and saying, create my class for today? I'll have 10 people aged 30 to 50 and give me a 20 pose sequence. I haven't even tried that myself. It just made me think of that. But
Yes. The answer is yes. And it's a great brainstormer in those ways.
Mhm.
My recommendation is don't take just what it says, because you know the little nuances of
Yeah, yeah,
your students, and maybe that you're in Florida and what the season is, and all the little things that
yeah,
you could prompt, but it's not worth it. But it's a great brainstormer. It might come up with a idea, or three asanas that you wouldn't have put in that sequence, and you thought, oh, that's really cool. And that's a good example of, like, use it as a collaborator. And and it will also increase your own creativity. And I hear that a lot too.
that's cool. As we get closer to closing our conversation, Julia, can you tell me about the course that you offer? Because you do coach people in the yoga world in ways to start to become acquainted with AI and use it in a responsible and healthy way. Can you talk a little bit about the course that you have put together?
Absolutely. So, Get Started with AI is the perfect place to start for people that are confused, overwhelmed, not sure where to start. And it goes through all the foundational skills, to be able to start thinking about AI, like knowing about AI, because one of the part of the fear is there's a massive education gap. This didn't exist, and it definitely didn't exist for the masses, and now it's everywhere. So what's the key information that you need to know, and then some core skills. And then for aspiring entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, small business owners, one time a year, which you'll see in the early spring, is Amplify with AI, which is directed at applying AI specifically to your business.
Nice. And that's the course you're currently working on.
Get Started is just
Is
launching
there? Yeah.
now, and then I did do Amplify with AI in the spring,
Oh, I see.
and it was wonderful. And what I noticed was, like, learning AI in week one and then applying it to your business in week two was too big of a learning curve. And so that's where Get Started really came from. Is so people can start learning it, start trusting it, start iterating with it, and then Amplify is focused on best practices in business, and in the modern world, integrating AI into your business so that you have more time to do the things that you really love to do.
Amazing, Julia. I love how you've been able to bring two what seem disparate career paths into harmony. And that's really amazing. I love that skill that we have as humans to like kind of take what we've learned and grow and do something different and then bring them together. And you've done an amazing job of that. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate your intellect and everything that you bring to the table here.
Thank
Is
you so much. And I'm
there
super passionate about it because it can be an enabler, and like, conscious entrepreneurs are doing such amazing, wonderful things in the world. And this can really enable and amplify all those wonderful things that they're doing.
I agree. I have to admit, I'm loving using all these tools with this show, to be honest. So, Julie, is there a closing statement? Do you have a or an opening statement? An opening uh, as we close the door, do you need to open something else, open our minds to something else before we go?
uh, Learn to live in a world with AI. And it is possible to keep your humanity in the process.
I love it. Thank you so much, Julia. I
Thank
really
you for
appreciate
having
it.
me.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you for having me.
I hope next time you're in Florida visiting your folks, I'll get a chance to see you again.
It's now a must do.
Thank you. Of
Thanks for having me.
course.